We know that the battle belongs to the Lord and that we've been redeemed and rescued because of his might and his power. And yet we also realize in this life we face continual battles and struggles and problems and temptations and sometimes even sin that comes before us. And so it's an ongoing challenge. And this is what Peter is writing about in the first chapter of Peter as he is writing a letter to churches hundreds of miles away, people that have never met Christ, people that maybe have never been to Jerusalem. Maybe they don't really understand a lot of the Old Testament stories and the events and the workings of God. But they're Christians, and so they've had to suffer through their life, not only in initially making the decision to follow Christ, and some people have to suffer that today, even in America, from their friends and family and co-workers and schoolmates trying to live the Christian life. Not everyone is going to appreciate the decision, or not everyone is going to encourage you or even to applaud you. We know that even today in the Middle East, even in China, in Africa, India, many other countries, to become a Christian may also mean physical harm or imprisonment, sometimes even death. And this is even what the Christians in the first century, perhaps as Peter was writing, had not yet encountered in a fierce way, but certainly there had been Christians that had died. We're familiar with Stephen, even in the Jerusalem area, in Acts chapter 7, who died because he was preaching Christ, and people didn't want to hear it, they didn't want to believe. They got very angry. But there was going to be eventually, about 70 AD, a great persecution from Rome against the church. And so Peter is not only sharing with the people so they can understand the experience they've already gone through, but maybe also to say there's still more to come. And maybe it's not going to get better, at least in the immediate future, but it may even get worse. And so he describes it as griefs, many griefs, severe griefs, talking about a sorrow. And sometimes we go through that in our lives. Things happen. Sometimes it's just an attack of Satan. Sometimes it's just a cycle of life. Sometimes it is news that we get that's unexpected or certainly unwanted. Things sometimes happen in our life and we say, well, where is God? How is this happening? How am I supposed to respond? How am I supposed to continue on? And what's going to happen to my faith even through these challenges? And so this is what Peter is trying to encourage the church to think about their future. It seems to be a fairly constant reminder in the New Testament. And that's what the book of Hebrews is about. People that are struggling with their faith and now are being tempted and considering returning to their old way of life, maybe to their old religion. James talks about that as well in the first chapter of James, about all the trials and suffering and temptations that come along because you are a Christian. And what are we going to do with those? And how do we respond to those? And you know, we read James 1, we read 1 Peter chapter 1, and sometimes even for us as Christians that we've been around for a while, it just doesn't always make sense. Not that these kinds of trials and sufferings would come, but who would respond in that way? And that's what we want to talk about, this response. And maybe that would encourage us in our faith as we grow, because I'm thinking these people that Peter's writing to, they've not been Christians very long. Most of us have been Christians a lot longer than them. We've read our Bibles a lot more than they've read their Bibles. We've had more Bible studies than they've had Bible studies, and yet he's encouraging them to continue on in the grace and in the knowledge of Jesus Christ. And so we want to talk about this idea of, is there any goodness that comes out of grief? Is there any benefit that comes out of suffering? Can we really grow even through a struggle like this in our life? And so in the text of 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 6, he says this, "In all this you greatly rejoice." And I've got a photograph there of, they took the photograph back then when Paul and Silas were in jail. You remember? But isn't that how they responded, though? Like in the middle of the night? You know, it's kind of interesting. Not only would we say the middle of the night, but we would say in the middle of the darkness. I don't think that their jails had lights. Oh, you could say, well, they had lanterns back then. Do you think anybody would waste fuel on lanterns for prisoners? In the middle of the darkness, could you imagine the other prisoners? I mean, it's pitch black. Maybe they think we should be sleeping. And here's some chums in the jail next door, and they're singing praises to God. Not only that, they're innocent. Most of the other people in that jail section, I mean, they've done some crimes and they know they're guilty. But these people, because they are Christians and they're teaching people about Jesus, and now they're singing hymns, singing songs of praise, rejoicing in the Lord always, as Paul would describe it in Philippians chapter 4. But in this you, even through the suffering and through the trials, in this you greatly rejoice. Though for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. All kinds of trials. They seem to come all the time and from all different directions, and maybe when we least expect it, or when we think, I think I've gone through almost enough that I can go through, and yet another one comes along. Through all kinds of griefs and trials. But he's saying in all of this, well, what is all of this? All of this. Well, I'm thinking the all of this must be what he previously said. And number one, I think, is the reason we can persevere. The reason we can make it through is because of this. It's because God is praised. And when I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, I said, God, I want you to be praised. I'm not so concerned about my life, about my happiness, about my welfare, about the direction, about things that may happen or things that have already happened. God, I'm just concerned about your glory. I'm concerned about you being thanked, you being honored, and you being praised. And so that's the number one thing, is that God would be praised. In all of this, that God would be praised. But not only that, he lists some other things. We're not going to go through them all, but there's just the preceding verses from verse 6. Great mercy, new birth, living hope. Jesus is raised from the dead. There's going to be a home in heaven. There's inheritance. We're shielded by God, and the salvation is soon to come. And because of these things, we greatly rejoice. And yet, on the other hand, we are also finding that there's challenges and there's temptations, and Satan is attacking. Satan wants to destroy us. He wants to bring us down. He wants to discourage us. Maybe he wants to neutralize us. Maybe he just wants us to crawl back underneath the rock that we came out of. He just wants to make us ineffective in the world. If he can't destroy us, he certainly does not want us to be influencing other people for Jesus. But even though we suffer all kinds of trials, you see there's a list there? There's a lot that we can rejoice in, even through the struggle. So we put things in perspective. And it doesn't minimize necessarily the pain we go through, but maybe it puts it into a context. Maybe we can understand a little bit more of maybe even why it's happening. Maybe because we are following Christ, Satan is working that much harder to try to destroy us. But because of these things, we continue on. Because of these things, we have confidence. Because of these things, we have a future. And so if we can somehow get the perspective there that God is continuing to work, and he will work in our lives. And so the next verse, 1 Peter 1 verse 7, these have come. What's the these? It's the trials. It's the temptations. It's Satan. Why is Satan still allowed to work? Well, there's a purpose. There's a purpose in our life, even for times of struggle and for pain. And not that it's enjoyable to go through, but there's lessons that can be learned even through them. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith. And I don't think it's so much that God needs to know. We read about Abraham in the Old Testament, and God said, I'll insert a little bit, do you really trust me? Do you really love me? And if you do, and if you are what you say you are, would you be willing to sacrifice your son for me? And Abraham said, yes, I'm willing to do that. And Abraham was willing to go through that, and yet God is the one who stopped him at the last minute, provided a substitute that would stand in the place of his son so that his son could live and the substitute would die. Sounds very similar to what we did around the Lord's table, right? But God didn't do that so that God would know, because God knows everything. God knew before what Abraham would do, but it's so Abraham would know. Abraham could understand that he is growing in his faith. And now Abraham, perhaps even through this, is going to realize, I can trust God even more now. My faith is growing. So sometimes the struggles along the way, don't want to discourage anybody, but sometimes they're smaller struggles because we're working up to even greater struggles. And God's saying, I'm going to make you stronger through this, through the challenge, through the pain. That's what they say at the gym. I know, I used to go to the gym. It's been a long time. But it's no pain, no gain. Right? If you're not willing to go through the suffering, you're not going to get stronger. If you're not willing to do the exercise, you're not going to win the race. If you're not willing to pump the iron, you're not going to build bigger muscles. So you go through the pain in order to grow, to get stronger. But here he's saying is, our faith is of greater worth than gold. So what do you do with gold? You want to make it pure. You want to make it better. But the gold has to go through a lot of suffering. It has to go through the fire. It has to go through the process in order to become pure, to become useful, to become valuable, to be something that would be admired. That's what God's doing through us. He's purifying us for His glory so that He gets the recognition. You see, with the gold, you may have a very beautiful gold piece of jewelry, maybe a ring or an earring or just something that's made out of gold. And very few people will look at that and say, wow, this is great gold. They'll say a goldsmith has done something extraordinary with this material. The praise doesn't go to the gold, it goes to the jeweler. This is the same thing with us. God's working through us so that we can become the people He's called us to be, that we bring glory and honor to Him. Not that we have glory and honor in ourselves. We are just a reflection of what He has made and who He has made us to be, that we would shine for Him. It's been said that in the ancient days, people would heat up the gold in order for it to become more pure. And when the goldsmith could look into the gold and see his reflection, he knew that it was at the point where it was pure. And if that's true, not sure if it is, didn't live back that far ago, but that's true. That's what God does for us. He allows us to go through challenges so when He looks at us, He sees His reflection. When people look at us, they see the reflection of Jesus in our life. They literally see the face of Jesus, the person of Jesus, the action of Jesus, the love of Jesus in us. Because we are reflecting Him because He has allowed us to go through these challenges. Refined by the fire. We'd say refined through the fire. And this is how God works, through the fire. We may think of a literal example of this. Old Testament, in the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Who when they stood up for God and said, we are not going to bow down and worship anyone else except Jehovah God, the creator of the world, the God in heaven, the ruler of all. We worship Him, and we're not going to bow down to any other. And they were thrown into the fiery furnace. And God preserved them and protected them Yeah, they had great faith. They were willing to suffer great harm. As a matter of fact, they said, God can protect us, but if he doesn't, that's okay. Either way, we are still going to serve God and trust in God. But God did protect them and preserve them, and they came out through the fire. And then the king realized, this is God working. He saw God working through them. And it changed a lot of people in the way they thought. Changed them in their faith and the decisions that were going to reflect even in their kingdom. Going through fire, that God would be glorified and he'd be honored. But our faith, you think about that, it's greater than gold. Greater than gold. And through that we get refined. In the book of Job, we're reminded something of what Job said, because we know he went through a lot of suffering. I mean, I can't really imagine all that he went through. But this is what it says in Job chapter 23 about God. This is before everything's been restored to Job. We read the end of the story and say, Job, don't worry. Or chapter 1, don't worry, Job. God's got this. Job chapter 2, it's going to work out in the end, Job. Just stay with it. Job, you know, you're going to be rewarded for your faith. Job, I know it's so difficult now, but just hang on. We can say that because we've already got to the end of the story, but he didn't know the end of the story. But even in the midst of his pain, this is what Job was able to say. God knows the way I take. He knows the way I am going. I don't know the way I'm going. I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why there's these trials. I don't know why the people react this way. I don't know why people treat me this way. I don't know why I have this temptation in my life. I don't know why I have suffering. I don't know why I've had such loss. But you know, God knows. God's watching out. God knows the way I'm going. I don't see it all, but he understands. This is the challenge we have, is that, you know, we're on this path and all we can see is a step or two, at best, what's in front of us. We say, I can't see the end of the trail. I can't see the end. But through faith we can see it, can't we? In faith we can say, God is the one who's taking me. He's leading me and guiding me. And he's told me about the end. He said, this is what it's going to be like. Would you trust me? Would you hang on? Would you keep on the path? Walk with me. So we can't see it physically. We see it through faith. But we know that God is the one who makes the path, who keeps us on the path, and who leads us down the path. Yeah, there's going to be struggles, but we stay on the path because we know what the end is going to be through faith. He knows the way I take. And when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. As gold. Do we trust God that much? That even if we faced the sufferings of Job, that we would, like Job, say, I just trust him. And somehow he's going to make all this bad turn into good. He's going to make me stronger. He's going to be with me through the challenges. He's going to work through even the worst of situations and circumstances. But you know, back to 1 Peter, even if it's suffering for being a Christian, God's still going to see me through. And he's going to strengthen me because he's on my side. So 1 Peter 4 verse 7, all this, would all this just result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed? So the interesting thing is, God is getting praise even through what we're doing now. But when he comes back, our life will result in God being praised, God being honored, that God's will was done, and that we were allowing God to work in our life. God wants to work in everyone's life. But we said, I will trust God and submit to him. This is the end goal. So ultimately, as a Christian, it's not all about the here and now. Now, you can go to some religious groups and they say, hey, your best life is now. Now, people who say your best life is now evidently aren't reading the same Bible I'm reading. Because if you read through the New Testament, it's going to say, if you are a Christian, you're going to suffer. You're going to be persecuted. Not everybody's going to like you. It's not all going to work out in this life. You are going to find things happening in your life because you're a Christian. Now, there's a lot of things that happen to everybody. People get sick. People lose their job. People get a divorce. People die. Sometimes that's life. But sometimes things happen to people just because you're a Christian. Even today in the Middle East, there are people that are persecuted because they're Christians. Literally killed. And sometimes all they have to do is to say, I renounce Christ. I will not follow Christ anymore. Or the Hindu gods are what I'm going to follow. Or the Muslim God is who I'm going to follow. That's all they have to say. And they will live. And even today, people die because they say, I follow Christ. And I will not turn. I will not turn back. I will not turn aside. I'm willing to die for Christ. Because they believe in the promises. They believe that God somehow is going to be praised even through that. The commitment that people have in being true to their Savior when Christ is revealed. So James chapter 1 says something very similar, doesn't it? Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And so again, we've got the image of the person that's training to win. Goes through an entire lifetime of training to be the best they can be. And this is what it is to be a Christian, just to continue to be faithful, to continue to grow in what we know. So again, the same struggle in the book of James. But another beautiful picture from 1 Peter chapter 1, just encouraging people to say, don't give up. This is what Peter says to probably a lot of the people he's never met before. Though you have not seen Jesus, you love him. These are people that again, live hundreds of miles away, maybe never been to Jerusalem, and certainly have never met Jesus personally, but they've heard about him. They've come to faith in him. Now they are following him and growing in him. Though you have not seen him, you love him, and though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and a glorious joy. That's kind of where we are as far as, we've never seen Jesus physically. We read through the scriptures and we come to have faith. But do we have an inexpressible, but hang on, hasn't he just been talking about grief and trials and tribulations and suffering and saying you've not even really gone through all there's to go through, it's going to even get worse? But now he's saying you've got this love for Jesus. You never even met him. Ephesians chapter 5 uses another kind of analogy of Christ in the church, or we'd say maybe Christ in the Christian. And that's of a husband and a wife, a man and his bride. The relationship they enjoy. And in a way, our relationship has not yet been fulfilled. It's almost like we are committed to Christ and he's fully committed to us, but we're not together yet. So it's kind of like the picture of getting married. And I don't know why it is that people think it's a really great picture to have the bride looking out the window, waiting. But for some people, even for a bride waiting, maybe in the back of your mind, you may think, hope he's going to show up. Right? I mean, we're getting married in a couple hours. Hope he's going to be there. But we don't have to worry about that with Jesus. We know he's coming. So as a Christian, we are standing by the window, waiting patiently. Say, I know I just don't know when. But I know for certain. Because you want to know something? I know that he loves me more than anybody. Anything. He just loves me. He's expressed his love for me. His desires to a relationship with me. He is seeking me. Maybe a sad commentary is this, that Jesus is much more eager to be with us right now. Like in other words, we're on his mind all the time. Like he is just anticipating being with us so much more than we are anticipating or eager to be with him. Now, sometimes we go through those phases saying, it'd be great if I went today, I met Jesus today, and went to heaven today. But a lot of time we're consumed with the things in the world. And I know sometimes it's hard to have Jesus on your mind 24 hours a day. You just kind of think, well, maybe right now. Maybe it's going to be before church is over. Maybe it's going to be after lunch, Depends where you're going, if you want that or not. But he wants this relationship now. And so we anticipate, we are eager, we are waiting. And this is why we're filled with this joy that we will be with God and reconciled with him, and we will be with him. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. And so again, it's just a reminder of this is what it's all about. Salvation. Being redeemed. In a way, we are enjoying salvation right now. Enjoying the love of God and the grace of God. We enjoy his power in our life, and we enjoy fellowship with his family here on the earth. But the salvation, the final redemption, the final consummation when we are going to be with him forever in heaven. Just constantly reminded, remember, dwell on this. Have this at the forefront of your mind. Think about this throughout your day, throughout your week. Think about this through times of struggle and pain. Think about this when temptation comes your way. Think about this maybe even in times of joy and celebration. Think about this when you're at home, or when you're driving, or when you're at church, or when you're at work, or when you go to school, wherever you are. Think about this. The salvation of your souls, the redemption, the love that Jesus has for you. And I think through that we can say, we can endure anything. Because the world may not be a safe place. Satan is going to be attacking us. But we need to have faith. We need to continue in our love. We need to realize that we are growing even through the struggle. And Jesus is coming back soon. Maybe today there are some that aren't Christians, who have never surrendered their life to Christ. And we always want to give that opportunity to say, I want this joy. I want this relationship. I want this promise. I want this blessing. So it's not a blessing or a promise that everything's going to go easy in your life if you become a Christian. But the promise is God will be with you no matter what happens. And you can still have peace and joy. And His love will be with you. If today you want to make Jesus the one you want to love and to serve, make Him the priority in your life, have a relationship with Him, He wants a relationship with you today. If today you want to be baptized into Christ, we are always ready to accept people who make that commitment to be in a relationship with God. Let's stand, let's sing the song, and if we can encourage you, please let us know.